UFOs, monsters, mysteries. You're listening to Talking Weird. And now, from a cabin deep in the Northwoods, your hosts, Dr. Dean Bertram and Jenn Durrell.
Hey, baby.
Hey, baby.
We have such a fantastic guest this week, and he's an incredibly nice guy to boot as well. I first met him back in 2017 at what was the inaugural Midwest Weird Fest, which is the film festival I run in Eau Claire, Wisconsin, when I screened his fantastic paranormal feature documentary, Trail to Terror.
Well, I was excited when you told me we were actually going to get to interview Dakota, because I have been a fan of his since his early YouTube days when he was with Ghost Adventures and now with Destination Fear.
I also have an incredible debt to Dakota and to his co-star Tanner Wiseman, because after they both came to Midwest Weird Fest, I became buddies with them on Facebook. And it's only because we were Facebook friends, and you were also Facebook friends with both of them, that you popped up in my Facebook feed as people you might know. And I was like, oh, who's this pretty lady? I think I'm going to friend request her.
Well, I'm happy I added you.
Baby, I'm super happy that you added me.
Who would have thought that we would have a podcast together?
Who would have thunk, indeed? And on that cheery note, I think we should just jump straight into the interview with the one and the only Dakota Laden. So, Dakota, the last time I actually got to talk to you was when we screened Trail to Terror at Midwest Weird Fest, and I think that was back in March of 2017. And you've come a long way from then. But what fascinates me is I remember when we did Trail to Terror, which is very much almost a proto-Destination Fear, that at the end of that documentary, you guys seemed genuinely disturbed by some of the experiences you'd undergone. And I know when I chatted to both you and Tanner, who were at the screening, I was actually surprised when I heard you did Destination Fear, because I could tell that that initial documentary had actually affected you guys psychically to a degree.
Yeah, no, that's so true. I mean, that's pretty much, we were dead set after the Trail to Terror documentary on, that was a fun experiment. That was a one-time thing. Like, let's not put ourselves through that again. But there did come a point, it was at least a year or two after, when everyone kind of came together, Chelsea, my sister, Tanner, and we all were like, gosh, like, it would be so fun to do it again. Like, I'm ready to go back. You almost like miss the adrenaline rush and the natural high of doing what we do, spending the night in abandoned buildings, haunted buildings, and sleeping alone. So at a certain point, we're like, we got to do this again. And I had put together like a sizzle reel, like, which is what television stations require for a pitch. And it got passed around for a long time. And I kind of just let go of it. I was like, you know what? I'm done with that. But I got hired to do a show called Ghost Adventures, operate camera on there. And so I did that for a couple of years, and then out of nowhere, Travel Channel had gotten the sizzle reel in front of them, and they reached out to me, and this is now almost 4 years after the documentary, and it was just a wild ride.
Oh, I bet.
Do you ever plan to air that publicly?
Yeah, so this is the funniest thing is, so I did this documentary. Any of like film nerds and tech people out there are going to relate to this. I did it on a program called Final Cut Pro 7.
Okay.
And Final Cut Pro used to be one of the main editing programs. And then all of a sudden they came out with a new program called Final Cut 10. They went from 7 to 10. And everything was wrong. No one liked it. Some people did, but not a lot. So most people moved to Adobe. And I was just too late to jump on the bandwagon to move over. And it wasn't until literally like 2 months ago where I finally converted everything onto Adobe Premiere. So I have it now finally in its full form. I just want to go in once I'm done editing the show, which I'm like a day away from finishing this season. Then I'm going to go back on into the doc and do another pass at it and figure out a way to get it out there.
Okay, great. I look forward to watching that.
Yeah, it was, I mean, it was amazing. It was such a passion project. It was Trail to Terror. It was so much fun.
I think it says a lot for your relationship with Travel Channel, or the type of company they must be, though, that it doesn't look like they made you change your original vision terribly, because to me, Destination Fear feels very similar to Trail to Terror. So I'm guessing you have an incredible amount of creative flexibility with that show. Well, that's the feeling that I have anyway.
Yes, 100%. It's definitely was a blessing that we made the documentary and had a proof of concept, and they were able to trust me knowing I had done the whole doc. Yeah, and there were some small things that changed, but they weren't things that I was like against or anything. We just had it's a longer format. The documentary, every location featured in the doc was only like a 20-minute segment. And this isn't 42 minutes now of TV for each location. So we had to figure out ways like, okay, I don't know if you remember in the doc, but like we didn't really do much in the daytime because it was literally 5 days in a row to 5 scary places. So the daytime we were really like sleepy and tired and filmed very little, and that very little of that made the edit. And so that's like one of the biggest differences is we started filming more of the actual traveling and the adventure because we have more energy, more crew too. I mean, before it was literally us 4. And so yeah, it helps having a few more hands on deck in the daytime. Now we're able to feature more of that fun travel stuff and sometimes scary travel stuff.
I really, really love the concept of the show. 4 friends, exploring haunted locations, but with no production crew. Do you actually have a production crew? We just don't see them, or?
So we have several cameramen in the daytime who help film what we do traveling across the country. One of them, Alex, who's actually on the show, does a lot of that filming too. Mm-hmm. And there's 2 other people who help out. But the cool thing is those 2 people are my best friends as well from high school, growing up in film class. And so it doesn't really feel like a TV crew. And then when we go into the actual locations, it's just us 4, myself, Chelsea, Alex, and Tanner. And there were some definite technical things to figure out. Usually TV shows, they like it if you have a lav mic on, and there's just no way to do that without bringing in a sound guy. So I didn't want a sound guy in there with us for the whole night. So we figured out a way in the camera to run like a 2-channel audio system where we have a small boom mic near the handlebar of each of our handheld cameras that's actually shooting at our mouths. And then we have the internal camera mic that's just rolling as a backup. So like a lot of the stuff I wanted to make sure it was as true as to the doc as possible. That's what made the documentary so scary for us, was that we were actually alone. And so we are actually alone at these places.
How do you do the air shots? Like before you actually go into the location, you can see the RV. How do you do that?
Yeah, we have one of our buddies, Will. So Will and our 2 other camera buddies, they are on location. They're outside, and they basically, that's their big thing that day, is getting the arrival. And we're out filming other things while they're getting ready for that shot. And we usually arrive at every location like right at sunset. So we only have about 10 minutes of actually pulling in, and it has to be a 1 take every time. And so it's a lot of pressure for 1 shot. And there's several cameras rolling and a drone in the sky. But once we get it, it's basically, see ya, Will, see you guys. We slam the door and they all go back to the hotel and they sleep. And they come pick us up at 6 a.m. and then we continue the filming.
Wow.
It's wild.
I love horror films and thriller films which are set in the snow. It's one of my kind of favorite spooky things to watch. So I love movies like The Thing and A Simple Plan. And I was so excited when I saw the season premiere, the one in Nopeming Sanatorium, which I think by the time we release this, most of the audience already would have seen. So it jacks up the fear level so much, that snow, but it's got to make your guys' lives harder. I'm assuming scarier as well while you're in those locations.
Yeah.
Definitely, because like in the summer, sometimes we'll hear noises and loud things that we can write off in our head as being an animal. This time around, we didn't see any animals. There was nothing.
Mm.
And then also people are out and about more. So at some of these abandoned buildings, we had one location first season in particular where we really thought, truthfully, someone might have actually been on the property trying to scare us, possibly, because it just was so crazy, the types of noises we were hearing. But the winter, there was none of that. Like, there was no one in sight at these locations. And so whenever we did hear something, it did make it a lot scarier. And the other thing, I guess, that the winter provides, other than just the cold, is the fact that it's longer nights. We actually were arriving and spending about 2.5 to 3 extra hours compared to the summer, just because it's darker longer. So that was crazy. We were even in there longer. But yeah, most of the locations except one, we were in the cold states. We were in Minnesota, Wisconsin, Montana, and then Pennsylvania as well. So we were freezing cold. I know my sister made a good point, though, Chelsea, with the cold. The only positive about it, and it's really a weak positive, but it's the only positive, is that we have so many layers on that it does bring you a minor sense of comfort. Like, you're not as exposed, even though it's like the classic, like, put your head under the sheets. Like, that's going to stop the killer. But it definitely felt like a little more secure.
I love the spin that's coming up as well in the series, where both Chelsea and Tanner get to pick a location each for a change. Without giving us too many spoilers, can you tell us who picked the scariest one? And maybe a hint at what the location is?
Yeah, so that was definitely something I wanted to eventually happen with this show. I didn't want this to be Dakota always picks, Dakota's always in control, because that could get boring. And also, I want to feel what they get to feel too. I want that. That's almost more scary, honestly. And so Chelsea and Tanner, they both picked a location. It's the second and third episode. So first episode is mine at the Nopeming Sanatorium. And then Chelsea, she picked a hospital in Texas called the Yorktown Memorial Hospital. And what really shocked me about it, I mean, abandoned hospitals, those are always creepy. But the history of this place was so dark. It was a hospital run by Catholic priests and nuns. And it has some pretty twisted history just with that. But the hauntings today that people experience there are very creepy. They see nuns lunging at people in the hallways. There's a demon, I guess, that haunts the chapel. And it was just a really dark location. And so I would have to say, like, Chelsea shocked me the most because I was not ready for demons in the chapel. But that was a real creepy night. And then Tanner's location was a prison in Montana. And I would say that one challenged me the most because last prison we were at first season was one of my harder nights. I had I felt like a lot of just negativity happened to me that night. And Tanner specifically picked a prison because of that and wanted to challenge me. And that was pretty tough. It was interesting too, because no one knew where we were going, the first three at least. So, like, I picked the first one, but Chelsea didn't know that I picked Minnesota. So she picked Texas. And then so we drive all the way down to Texas.
Oh, wow.
And then Tanner picks Montana. And so we drive all the way back up. And that was the order that we wanted it to be, like Dakota, Chelsea, Tanner. But holy crap, did we drive a lot more. So much traveling. There were several days of just not even filming, just in the RV and in the cars, just driving.
I know in Trail to Terror, no, I know probably not a lot of people have seen it yet, so I don't want to give too many spoilers because you said you might be releasing it, but by the end of it, one of you walks away by the last location. In Destination Fear, when you did season 2, was there ever a moment where anybody considered not continuing or bailing early because of the ongoing fear and the ongoing pressure of the situation?
Yeah, so season 1, I would say we were very close at times, but this season was so weird because every location of the 6, every one of our, like us 4 of the cast, we each would say a different one was our scariest, which is kind of weird because usually we all can agree, like, that was the scariest, but each of us had our own different personal experiences at each location. And for me, luckily my worst night was the last night. So I didn't have to worry. I didn't have to worry about doing it again. I was done. But I mean, everyone had a terrible night. But there was one location where one of us had to go to the hospital, and it wasn't. It's hard to explain. You'll almost have to just see it because we don't even know what really happened. It seemed like it could have been possibly a sickness, like that, what was going on with him, but it all happened in a matter of minutes, and he was fine all day. And I don't know, you'll see. I don't want to say it, but yeah, you'll see. This was
Wow.
that was the moment though when he went to the hospital. We were all debating if we should keep doing this, and it was a tough moment.
Gosh.
Someone did leave one of the nights and had to be going to the hospital, and we had to finish the night without that person.
Wow.
I'm glad you're all okay by the sounds of it now, though.
Yeah, definitely okay, but it was freaky. It was a really scary night.
I suppose that leads into another question. In this season, were you ever under any physical attack? Like, were you ever scratched or harmed by an unknown presence, or did you ever walk away feeling you had an attachment from any location, you or any of the rest of the cast or crew?
Yeah, I mean, so when we all left this road trip and we're done with this season, a lot of us had nightmares and the standard, like trying to recover from a trip like this. And there definitely was a weight on our shoulders. And the hardest thing about it, though, is it's very hard to pinpoint what night it could have come from because we're doing them in a row. We don't go home until the road trip's done. So it's really hard to tell. Like, we go to so many places with dark hauntings and dark entities, and it's just like what we experience with the darkness. Sometimes it's like, how do you pinpoint what location that could have even come from? But I have had nightmares about a specific location, the one that affected me the last episode. But there were definitely physical accounts this season. It wasn't as crazy as someone getting scratched, but I did have an experience at the Montana prison that Tanner picked that was by far the most unique for me. I don't want to give it away because it's one of my favorite moments in the whole season.
Okay.
But it wasn't like a scary. Let's just say that it was kind of like it was one of the first experiences I had where I felt wanted. If you know what I'm saying, it was weird.
Oh wow!
Oh.
It was really weird.
Gosh.
Yeah. It was weird.
Was it a woman's prison or a man's prison?
It was a woman's presence.
Wow.
Yeah, and it was ridiculous. Like, you'll see it, and it's one of my favorite scenes, just because it's not always, I guess, scary. Usually we're so scared, and this one was like, what the actual F is going on?
So when you're sleeping at these locations, do you ever have a spirit that tries to communicate to you during the dreaming process?
Yeah, I mean, I've had moments where it's hard to tell, like, because we have things happen in the room. And this season, too, more than last season, we tried to sleep with like some sort of piece of equipment, whether it be just a recorder or a device that picks up motion. But we tried to have everyone sleep with something. So if there was something in the room with us, it had more of a chance of making itself known. Mm-hmm. But there were a few times where you'd be laying there. I mean, we had a lot of crazy accounts that happen. I feel like most of the activity, most nights, it picks up when we're alone and sleeping.
Right. Yeah.
But this time around, there was, the season premiere, which people will probably have already seen, the No Pending Sanatorium. We did capture something on camera while someone was sleeping that was very odd, and something moving next to them that should not have been moving. It wasn't like a big movement, so it was kind of trippy. But I know, going back to the beginning of the question, though, there have been times where I will be laying there and you'll just feel like, I don't know. I don't even know if it's like psychic or picking up on something, but you do. Like, I have seen like faces in my head when I shut my eyes sometimes, and it freaks me out because I don't want to open my eyes now. And then I don't know what that was. Those are the hardest parts to even put in the episodes. I don't ever really make the cut because it's kind of hard to talk to the camera about, like, I just saw this thing in my head. So, but there are moments like that for sure.
Yeah. How do you prepare yourself mentally when you go into that? I mean, is there like a ritual? Is there something that you do to just kind of wrap your brain around it so that way you're not scared?
Yeah, it's it's weird because I love abandoned haunted buildings. I've always loved like urban exploring, and doing this show has given us access to some of the coolest abandoned buildings and haunted buildings in the country that urban explorers just wouldn't get access to. So it's hard because on my way there, I'm always terrified, but I'm super excited too. Like it's this weird balance of like, I know this is going to be a brutal, scary night, but I'm also just so like excited to see this place finally. Most of the places we go to, I've been researching for a long time. And, but preparing, we all have our own little rituals and things we do, saying prayers and just trying to surround ourselves with the light if we can. And honestly, music too. Music helps a lot the next day, just putting good music on and then talking with everyone. That's like our biggest thing is detox the next morning when we're all driving, and the next day, just talking about what happened, if there's anything still bothering us, we like to talk about it before moving on to the next location, which is usually right away.
Makes sense.
Have your views on the paranormal, I'm not sure what they were before you started doing these type of regular visits to haunted locations, has it changed since before Trail to Terror to where you are now? Like, do you have a different interpretation of the paranormal, or has it always been fairly similar?
It hasn't changed a lot. I still have more questions, I guess, than I do answers at this point, but I would say I really do think there's something to fear and paranormal and just feeding off of that energy. And I feel like not all the time, sometimes at locations, whatever is haunting there, whatever might be there is nice and positive. And so maybe us being scared might actually hurt the chances of it communicating. But I feel like anything darker and more malevolent, it feeds off of that. It likes that we're scared. And there are times where it's like, everyone stop being feared and scared. Like we go so crazy sometimes where we're like, it's happening because you're scared, Chelsea.
Right.
It's like, is it? I definitely think there's something to it. I just don't know what it is.
Yeah. They definitely feed off of fear. Definitely.
Totally. And being alone too, like I've learned so much. Like we've had locations where as a group, it's like interesting. We hear some things, we get some interesting responses, but it's like, okay, this place isn't too bad. And then we all separate and it's like, oh, nope, it just wanted Tanner to be alone and go mess with him now. And so it's always interesting when we separate.
Yeah, you're more vulnerable that way. So perfect. Prime meat, I guess you could say.
Ghost bait.
Right, yeah. You had mentioned before in several interviews that your experiences happened or began when you were a child at your home. Do you want to talk about that at all?
Yeah, we did this premiere episode. We started off in Minnesota, so we actually were able to talk even more about that, which is awesome. Because it's a lot of people ask me about this, and it's not like as terrifying as people think it is. Where it's not like this horror story where the house was bleeding or anything like that. But we were having experiences, and it started off with just my sisters, and my parents didn't really believe them. And then I had an experience. I thought there was a man in our house. And then I didn't tell anyone about that. And a few days later, my younger sister had called the police because she thought there was a man in the house, unbeknownst to like me telling her. Like that's when it was like, okay, what is going on? And a lot of it was darker. There was things happening with one of my sisters had passed out when she thought something was like chasing her, and it was my older sister at the time. And the biggest moment for me though was seeing my mom coming up the stairs once with tears in her eyes, and she said she like opened the storage room door and something like a man, she said, lunged at her but went right through her.
Oh wow.
And that's when everything kind of changed, once my parents started believing it, because then it was like a serious issue. And we did several things. We got it blessed. We did everything we could possibly think of, and the house did get better. I still don't know why it happened. We did have neighbors before we ever even built our house there that told my dad not to build the house there because we were one of the first houses to build in these woods. And apparently several guys, and there's even a newspaper article about it called the Boogie Woods. And apparently there was some sort of rituals that were going on in those woods, and hunters who would even go in there would see demons and weird animals that aren't real animals. And all this weird stuff. And my dad, he was was warned too by these neighbors before building the house. So maybe that has something to do with it, most likely. But it did go away, and it definitely stopped, I'd say, completely. One of the more telling things for me in that whole story, though, was our dogs. We had these dogs, several dogs, Australian Shepherds, and they would not go in the basement at all. They wouldn't. They would like bark. You'd have to like force them to go down, and even when you brought them down, they'd run back up. And this was weird. And this is during all of this, and most of the activity and the things that we were experiencing was in our basement. So when it all was over, and there was like a solid year after, like things slowly just slowed down and to the point where it stopped. But a year goes by and the dogs are down there all the time. It's like their new hangout. Like that to me was one of the weirder things.
That's interesting. Huh.
Yeah, it's pretty creepy. And right away, I was young too, so this was it was funny because I was very fascinated at that point with the paranormal, and I took an interest in it. But then, I was doing filmmaking my whole life. So during all this, I had cameras, so I'd set them up in my basement. And me and Tanner, who's on the show, we would literally spend the next day after recording my basement for the whole night while everyone was asleep. We'd watch it and we'd find things too that creeped us out. And now look what we're doing, like something very similar. And the weird thing was too, is it all didn't really merge until Trail to Terror. I had only ever done comedy stuff and some horror stuff, but a lot of comedy and just weird dark comedies. And then all of a sudden, like from us just urban exploring all the time, the idea happened where I'm like, gosh, I should really mix my passion with paranormal with filmmaking. I mean, filmmaking was number one, definitely always is number one, but it was cool. It all just kind of was meant to be.
It seems like Zach Baggins really took you under his wing as well. Do you still consult with him sometimes when you're going to a location, or does he still sometimes, give you a call and give you some suggestions or feedback or anything like that?
Yeah. So, I mean, I did his show for 2 years, and that's where I learned a lot of stuff. I was filming them. I went into the lockdowns with them and filmed for a majority of those episodes too. And I learned a lot there. And the show, Travel Channel wanted the show while I was still on Ghost Adventures. And, Zach was okay with that, obviously. Like he's behind it. He was a producer on it. But yeah, like once I left and it was my last episode, he gave me some advice, go like take this on. Like he was very confident in me as a filmmaker at that point. And so he's like, you got this, like, go enjoy this adventure. The crappy thing is that it's been a lot of work now, and it's really hard to keep up with those guys. And I'm already a very antisocial person. I just work a lot and edit a lot. And so there hasn't been as much communication as there was before, but definitely we talk all the time behind the scenes, and he says a lot of very nice things and positive things. And yeah.
That's good. That's good that you got a mentor there.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a dream location or some bucket list locations out there that you haven't visited yet on the show that you're hoping to go to in perhaps a season 3?
Yeah. So, I mean, I have a list of places that I've been slowly checking off, but I still have a lot of locations still in the US, which would be fun and awesome. But my real goal is to do something international. I would love to go to the UK or Europe, anywhere in Europe, even Australia. It would be, I don't know. I just think that there's just so much darker history and richer history in some of these countries that it would be almost twice as scary, I feel like. There's an island in Italy called Pavaglia Island where they would put people who were dying from the Black Plague, and it's got, I don't know the number of deaths, but whatever it is, when you read it, it's very shocking. And that's definitely a nightmare/dream location to go explore.
Oh yeah, that definitely has something imprinted on it.
Yeah.
Do you have a piece of equipment that when you're out there investigating is perhaps your favorite or your go-to, or something that you feel like you perhaps would rather not go without if there was only one piece of equipment other than a camera that you could have with you?
Yeah, I mean, with our show and just what we like to do, we do try to limit gear. We use some just to put it to the test, especially if someone has been at that location and used that piece of gear and had luck with it. Um, so we do like to put stuff to the test. I will always say my favorite is just us and how we're feeling and what we go through, and definitely like ourselves are the best tool. But if I had to pick one, I would say, gosh, I don't know. It's a tie between like the digital recorder always fascinates me because it's very easy to wrap my head around. It's an audio recorder, set it down, and you ask a bunch of questions, and when you play it back, you're listening for responses, and that to me is the creepiest when there is a response because everyone in the room's like, I didn't say that, I didn't say that. And
Yeah.
cut to the camera's angles and like, nope, no one said that. Where does that voice come from? That's always like the scariest and one of the bigger payoffs for me where I'm like, dang, like, I don't know how to disprove that.
Yeah.
And then my second would probably be, it's kind of broad, but just any sort of a device that picks up either motion or electromagnetic energy that can go off. It's not as direct and you can't talk and have a conversation through it, but it at least will let something there show its presence by getting close to a device that picks up energy, and then it'll go off and let us at least know that it's there. And we have had luck with devices like that where we've been able to say, like, can you beep that thing twice for yes and once for no, and start having a conversation that way where the answers are beep beep and it's like, oh my god, that's yes.
Yeah.
But yeah, I would say digital recorder though.
Have you guys ever tried on a Ouija board?
I did in my basement when we were growing up, and that was very dumb. I was just not thinking, like, that just put fuel onto the fire. But I haven't ever since. I really like to, as much as close as I get to some of these dark entities and the dark hauntings and putting myself in its environment, I try my best not to taunt or draw it out too much if it's actually genuinely evil. Yeah. I just don't want to ruin my mentality or anything over this experiment, but maybe sometime down the road as an ultimate fear experiment, break out a Ouija board, but I don't know.
Yeah. So have you formed any opinions or theories of life after death since you've experienced so much?
It's hard to say. I mean, because you have locations, like my house where no one died there that we know of, and why are we having these terrifying encounters? And that's to me has been one of the harder things to wrap my head around, and I've heard of it at other houses and places where people are experiencing things, but it's a brand new house. So
yeah,
I will say I have nothing set in stone, nothing official, but I definitely think there's something just to land itself and just energy that may be attached to land. Because I have noticed a pattern where we've been to some locations, even in the documentary Trail to Terror, that it's a sanitarium, but it's built on Native American land,
right?
Where they were massacred and just terrible things were done to them. And I almost feel like that almost every time that's involved, where there's something richer than just a establishment, that the haunting is so much more enhanced.
Yeah. Do you have any?
Sorry.
Do you have any interest in the mystical creatures, cryptids, or UFO sightings? Have you experienced anything that, or are you interested in exploring that avenue?
Totally. I think I haven't really ever, Bigfoot and all that. I haven't been able to experience it myself, and I haven't really given it the best shot. But UFOs, I would say, are truthfully more intriguing to me than even the paranormal. I think UFOs and aliens and that stuff to me is just, it's so, I mean, look up at night and you see all these stars, and then you realize all those stars are just in our galaxy, and there's 500 billion other galaxies. And it's like, wait, there's gotta be stuff out there. There's gotta be more. I did have an experience in Wisconsin, actually, with my mom and my sister Chelsea. And we were taking a road trip to visit my uncle, and it was a 6-hour drive, whatever. And I was videotaping the whole road trip, vlogging it because I was going to make a YouTube video and just put that up as a fun little road trip video. And I filmed everything. I filmed the dumbest things, dumbest signs, the weirdest people. Like, I didn't turn it off. And for some reason, this is what freaks me out, is we had this experience. We were driving. It's about 11 o'clock at night now. Cornfields left and right of our car. And this thing caught up to us from behind. It was about 15 feet off the ground, I'd say. And I'd say 3 feet maybe in diameter, but it was a perfect sphere. And it wasn't blinking, it was pulsing. It, like, definitely not like a blinking. I've seen like drones and stuff more recently, in modern drones and stuff like that. This was breathing like light. And creepiest experience, we for the whole minute we're just looking at it and talking about it, and like we weren't even thinking alien. We were like, it's the government, say hi to the government, and like laughing. And then at some point my sister was like, Mom, like maybe we should speed up, like this is kind of creepy. We thought it was on the telephone line, like it was attached to it. That's like the height and right next to it where it was. And so we're like, maybe it's riding the telephone line. Like we weren't thinking. We're like, oh yeah, it's Wisconsin, different technology than Minnesota. And like we even told my uncle, and like right after, when he was like, what are you guys on? Like, no, Wisconsin doesn't have drones on. And it was like so weird. And we ended up actually speeding up. My mom kicked it into like full drive. And as we rounded this corner, we got ahead of this thing. All of us except my mom were eyes out the back window. And we saw this thing round the corner, still pulsing, and then it just slowly just drifted into the woods and got off the trail. But that to me was even more crazy. So I was like, it's not like, if that was a man-operated drone, which at the time that wasn't even a thing. Phantom drones and all that hadn't even come out yet. Yeah. If that was a man-operated drone, they just dodged a million trees. So it was weird, super weird. And ever since then, I've been 100% like, I don't think what I saw was. I know what I saw wasn't anything that we know about. So it was either was our government and we were right, and there's just something we don't know, or we saw something else.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's fascinating. I've seen a couple lights myself. I didn't know, what it was either. So it would definitely be interesting to learn, what that is.
I know. And after that experience too, like just doing research, it seems like that type of account is very common. These orbs of light that aren't that big, like not big enough for even a person to really fit inside.
Right. Yeah.
And that's just so bizarre.
There's a rich history of will-o'-the-wisp type lights in Wisconsin, interestingly enough, and in most of rural America, and also in rural Australia, which sounds very much like what you encountered then, Dakota.
Totally. And it was so, I don't know, like I always thought of UFO encounters as in the sky and you're looking at it from the ground, like what is that? But this was so close. At one point it was probably within 10 feet of us, and it just our response to me didn't make any sense, because we were almost like in a trance. That's the best way to describe it, because we were acting weird, we were laughing like it's the government, like almost like we were on drugs. It was really weird. And I had a HD camera in my hand that I was filming everything with, and I didn't turn it on. I didn't even think to roll on that. And I had been fascinated with the paranormal and stuff before, so it wasn't like my brain was not acting right, and no one's brain was acting right. And we didn't even talk about it for like, we got back, we called my uncle after, but then none of us even brought it up for a good half a year until we were in the kitchen and someone brought it up, and it like came back to us like that. We were like, oh my gosh, yeah, what the heck? We never talked about that. Like, it was the weirdest thing. Like, we just forgot.
Oh, wow. Well, now it's even hard to, differentiate a UFO because, Elon Musk has come up with this Starlink train, and my son the other night sent me something. He's like, oh, look what I caught. And I even put it on my Facebook page to see what people thought about it. And they even mentioned that Starlink train, but, we're still not sure what it was, because instead of it like a meteorite, it would go down. But this one was actually going up. So it's still unknown.
There are a lot of weird things in the sky, but it's interesting that you didn't film it, Dakota. I do think that sometimes when people experience strange phenomenon, there is that weird psychological component. I have a very similar, which I've never actually talked about. I've certainly never talked about it on this show, but there's a high strangeness UFO kind of hotspot in Australia. It's an area called the Blue Mountains. And when I was doing my academic research on UFOs, I just went there for the fun of it with a group of friends one time to do UFO spotting. There are all these rumors of UFO bases, and certainly regardless of a UFO base or not, people always saw strange things in this kind of valley in the Blue Mountains. And we were there all night. You know, we were in our 20s, so we had a few drinks and, you know, we had a fire and we didn't see anything. But towards the end, there were all these very strange blue flashes, like unexplainable. I still look back on it. But instead of going, well, we're here to find weird, strange things, we were just kind of mesmerized by them. And then we just packed up and left.
Yeah.
You know, it wasn't a rational reaction from people who were there to see something strange. That's why I wonder if these, whatever a phenomenon is, whether it's ghosts or demons or UFOs or whatever, if somehow it has some connection with our own psyches or our own biology. Is that something that you've experienced at any other time other than when you saw that will-o'-the-wisp type light, a sense that somehow your psychology was changed with these experiences?
I've never had anything like that since, but I 100% think so. There's just there's so many things that didn't make sense with the way we reacted, similar to your story, where it didn't make sense. Like when I say I filmed everything, like it was everything. It was like so crazy. I filmed everything after that moment too. Like minutes later, I was filming a raccoon crossing the road and laughing at it. Like it was like the weirdest thing. And I was the type of guy too, who if I saw like a fight going on, I'm the first one to have my camera out, my phone and filming it. Like I definitely should have filmed that. And I do think we were, I don't know how or what happened that night, but somehow we were influenced in a way. And it happened to all of us, like my sister and my mom. And we all have the same recollection of it.
It's mind control.
Yeah. Seriously, though. Like, holy crap.
Yeah.
You know, it's funny because I do wonder, I know we joke when we say it's mind control, but as I hinted at, I do think there is some deeper connection sometimes between the observer and the observed. And I think it experiences like the one you mentioned, Dakota, and the one that I mentioned. And there's lots of similar ones. I know some of your experiences, Jen, that you talk about when you lived on the farm, your actions weren't always necessarily rational in the face of in the face of a paranormal experience.
Yeah, not at all. No, all you could do is just sit there and stare at it. Like, you're trying to figure out or come up with a logical explanation of what you're seeing. So you don't even think about a camera. You're just too busy, just mesmerized. Like, what the hell is that? Yeah.
Totally. I mean, that happens on the show even sometimes where we're like, our reactions are so funny because up until that point, it was like, yes, we got this. And then all of a sudden something happens and it's like everyone's cameras just start shaking like an earthquake and running. And it's like, whoa. We got to keep them going. Yeah. Our finale actually this season is in Wisconsin. And we did talk about that a little bit. We touched on that story I just shared a little bit, just briefly, because we were in the area that was one of the more hot spots for UFOs. And we actually visited someone who owns a bar that is all aliened out and decked out. So like that became part of the actual theme in that episode, was just talking about the aliens. But yeah, I mean, that was a very crazy experience. I don't know if I've really talked about that much, honestly.
You know what? It sounds almost like that's something you could do as well as, or instead of, or after Destination Fear. Like, you seem to have such an interest in the topic that you could do a fab reality series on UFOs, I think.
Totally.
Is that something that's crossed your mind? I have a suspicion that it might have.
Yeah, it has for sure. I've always wanted to do something with it. It's hard. It's definitely, I think, harder approach than even the paranormal because it's so massive. We're not talking about a house or a building where this thing could be. It's everywhere. But I definitely could see myself at some point taking on, even if it's just behind the camera, producing and some sort of a UFO type concept. I've had ideas before, nothing I've fallen in love with, so I haven't taken a shot at that yet, but for sure.
I don't often ask writers or artists or filmmakers about other people's work, but have you seen the show Hellier by any chance?
Which one?
Hellier, Hellie.
I haven't.
Oh, you need to watch that.
Okay. Okay, I
Yes.
definitely will.
It's very fascinating. It's awesome.
And that's on Amazon Prime, I think.
Yes,
I think so.
Yeah, and also the new Skinwalker, The Secret of Skinwalker
yeah.
Ranch. Yeah,
That's fascinating.
that's a good one. Yeah.
I definitely will look into Hellier. That sounds awesome.
I think why you'd enjoy Hellier too. I mean, we did the season 2 finale at Midwest Weird Fest. So the Hellier team and you are both alumni of Midwest Weird Fest.
That's awesome.
But what's fascinating about it is that it doesn't demarcate the paranormal phenomenon as much as people tend to. So it doesn't have that distinction between monsters or psychic phenomenon or UFOs or perhaps, ghosts or witchcraft. It tends to see all of these things under a similar umbrella, the way the writings of John Keel or Jacques Vallée or people like that suggested, which is one of the great appeals to me. But I think why you would find it particularly interesting is that they do use electronic type equipment as well in some of their investigations. Like they have a device, and Jen, you can probably talk far better about this than I can, but for example, the Estes method, it uses a ghost box or something. Is that a spirit box is what it's called?
It's
right?
SB7 is what they use.
Oh yeah, the SB7.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's cool. That's fascinating. That's a different approach.
But they use it to talk to potentially space brothers or some other extraterrestrial or interdimensional intelligence other than perhaps ghosts. But maybe it's all the same thing anyway. I do think that's a show you'd find interesting.
Yeah, I'll totally look into that. That's awesome. Hellier. Okay, yeah. I got it open right here. I'm looking at the pictures. It looks creepy.
Yeah.
It is freaky, but you know what? I still think the scariest show on television is yours, Dakota. And the reason is because it deals with just that rawest potential fear. And it's the thing that I love most about Trail to Terror when I programmed it for Midwest Weird Fest. And I love it because it's exactly the same on Destination Fear. Just people in these locations which have some dark energy hanging on them and the reaction of the people who experience it. It's perhaps the rawest example of people experiencing the paranormal that I've ever seen. So
thank you. I mean, that's definitely something we all try to really make note of, especially because of the documentary. That was a big goal of ours. Was at the time we didn't even realize like what we were doing and how like different it really was, but it wasn't until we started developing the show when it got picked up and like just the whole like the one take of pulling up, like stuff like that was very important to me to not lose the same type of feeling we had with the doc where, there were even like notes for some of the camera guys who were outside. It was like, hey, I know like we're all friends here, but like I don't want like once we get those drone shots and camera shots, like we got to go. Like it just needs to be us here. And it's something we pride ourselves in. And I think the fact that myself and Alex and Tanner too have taken a passion with filmmaking for our whole lives. I mean, I've been doing it since I was like 7. Because of that, we were able to pull off a show so raw because we have so much trust. I mean, over half of the show is filmed on our 4 handheld cameras and our tiny little $200 boom mics. And I mean, the actual cameras and audio gear that we're using for over 60% of each episode is stuff that is easily attainable for anyone. They're the same cameras guys are using to film their kids play sports. And it's interesting, like because we were able to do it filmmaking and really take a big passion with that and pull it off, we were able to do a show so raw. A lot of these other paranormal shows, I'm sure a lot of them would love to go into a location without a camera guy or an audio guy, but they have to because they don't know, they didn't take up film really, and we can actually do that, which is awesome.
Yeah, that was, as I said, the thing that impressed me most about Trail to Terror and still impresses me, that immediacy. I remember when I saw Trail to Terror initially, and especially when I realized I'd already programmed it, but when I realized how few people you had involved and the age of you guys doing it, it was a staggering feat. I mean, it still is something which I talk to friends in the film community about today as an example of people who pulled off, and you still pull it off regularly because of Destination Fear, but this incredible magic on such a limited budget and such a limited crew, it really is fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, we had actually no crew. It was wild. It was myself, Chelsea, Tanner, and our buddy Colin at the time that did the doc with us, and it was just us. And all of the budget was literally renting the RV, renting out some of these locations, and the fee of filming there. And that was it. I mean, we shot it for almost like 10 to 12,000, and then there was a couple thousand in posts that came up with just licensing music and stuff, but it was so cheap and so crazy, and just a total passion project. Though I don't know, because it wasn't like I was like, I want to do something paranormal and that's it. I don't really care. Like, let's just do it. It was like this idea. It had developed slowly, a road trip. I'm the only one who knows. And then, the sleeping alone. And by the time the idea was done, like, I was so excited to do it that the work to prepare to do it became very easy. Arranging like the interviews and the locations and just scheduling out like how it's even possible in only 5.5 days. Yeah, it was wild. I don't even know how we did it either. Like, looking back on it, it was so crazy what we tried to do, and so dangerous probably too. like oh my gosh, there's so many things that could have gone wrong. Thank God they didn't.
Yeah. You don't even have any security there whatsoever.
No.
I mean, I can't even imagine going into a building. I mean, for one, you guys get the whole story before you go in. Now, I investigate myself, and I prefer not to know a dang thing because then your imagination just runs off.
No, I've actually thought about doing that before, and we might do that coming up. And if we decide, if travel lets us keep going, where doing a location where one person doesn't get to hear anything.
Yeah.
And just see what they encounter and see if it'd be awesome.
Mm-hmm. That's I would love to see that.
We might have to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Now, before we let you go, Dakota, I'm curious because you've been to so many locations and you've done so much on the ground work now. What's your one scariest moment so far? And it might even be on the show. It might be before it. And when I say scariest, I imply something paranormal rather than, a real, physical situation. But what's the scariest paranormal experience that you've ever had?
I have a few that come close. Like, I've had several experiences that I had like markings show up on my back that definitely were not an allergic reaction. Definitely was not me leaning against something. Wasn't wounds from anything else. Like, they had burned, pulled up my back, and there were these markings. That was one of them. It's really hard to wrap my head around that experience, especially because I know myself more than anyone, and I've never had skin issues. I have very tough skin, and it was just weird. But this season, actually, I don't think I've ever talked about this yet. This could be a first right here. But there was the Wisconsin episode. It's almost like you have to see it just to understand how scared I was. But we're in an asylum in the middle of nowhere in Wisconsin that has all of these very dark accounts. Mm-hmm. And I'm in one of the more easy sleeping arrangements too. Like, I kind of thought I got off the hook. So I wasn't even, my guard was very down. And about 2 hours into the sleeping, around 4 a.m., I start to hear dogs barking like crazy. But these aren't like far away dogs. And there's not even like neighbors of this asylum. Like, we are in a cornfield. And these dogs, at least 2, maybe 3 dogs barking like crazy. And it sounds like they're almost right outside like my window. And I wasn't even thinking anything of it until after the fact. And you'll see, like, I perch my head up. I'm talking about these dogs. Like, what is going on? Like, this is actually, at first it was like annoying and kind of like, you're ruining the audio. But now I'm like kind of worried. Like, why are there dogs and where did they come from? And like, I'm talking to the camera as this is going on. It goes on for a solid 15 to 20 minutes, the dogs. And so I lay down, I try to shut my eyes. And while the dogs are barking, my camera farthest away from me hits the ground out of nowhere. It was totally static. I set it up perfect. Like, not perfect, but I mean, good. Like, I set up cameras on tripods all the time. And I didn't even know what happened at first. I woke up screaming. I flashed my light. Didn't realize it was my camera on the ground for a second. My camera was totally shattered. And it was just one of those experiences where all of that tension and buildup freaked me out. So, I mean, these dogs were just nonstop. And I'm in an abandoned asylum laying in a hallway all by myself. And like, something about the way it went down and the order of events, it just was like maximum adrenaline rush, fear. And we called it right after that. We still had about another hour we could have slept. And I was just like, I was almost brought to tears. Like I was pretty shaken up. Like that was, I don't know, like of all people too, for me, it was another one of those camera things where I'm like, why the camera? Like, is that,
Right.
is that like a personal jab? Like,
Right. Yeah.
it was so weird. I don't even know how to explain it, but one of the most terrifying experiences, and people will get to see that this season. It's so freaky, and the dogs and everything. Like they were so loud that we didn't hardly even had to boost the audio to like hear them going crazy.
Wow.
I can't wait to see that episode.
Mhm.
As I can't wait to see all of them.
I'm so excited for this 6. These locations, every single one of them. There's something in each episode that I'm looking forward to people to see.
Oh yeah, I can't wait.
You're a great guest. Thanks so much for being on the show, Dakota.
Yeah, thank you. I'd love to do this again and hopefully make another Weird Fest one of these times. Me and Tanner were talking about it yesterday. Like that was such an enjoyable experience, just having some of the craziest, weirdest movies and shorts.
Yeah.
We had so much fun. I got to do that with my mom. Like that was such a good bonding experience. We both love movies, so it was such a good time. So I would love to do, even if I don't have anything in the fest, so I'd love to come back.
You're welcome whenever you want to, and if you ever have anything, it goes without saying that we'd screen it.
That would be awesome.
Dakota Laden was such an incredible guest. We completely enjoyed chatting with him and learning all about his adventures. You can find Dakota on Twitter at Dakota Laden, Instagram at Dakota Laden 7, and on Facebook at Dakota Laden Official. He also has a YouTube channel with hilarious skits under the name Cinematic Productions. And whatever you do, don't miss a single episode of the 2nd season of his incredible paranormal series, Destination Fear. It airs on Travel Channel Wednesday nights, 10 p.m., 9 Central. Of course, you can always find us at TalkingWeird.com. If you haven't already, please like the show on Facebook and Instagram at Talking Weird Podcast. Make sure you never miss an episode by subscribing to Talking Weird. We're available on most podcast platforms and YouTube. And if you enjoy the show, please leave us a review. Dean and I would really appreciate it. Next week, join us for our wildest ride down the rabbit hole yet, as we interview one of the most controversial and pivotal figures of the history of UFO belief, retired Special Agent of the Air Force's Office of Special Investigations, Richard Doty. Until then, keep it weird.